Hello, everyone, and welcome to my YouTube channel. This page has not been active for quite some time, but I am hoping to get some usage out of it again. Hopefully, put out a little bit of informative content for people and have some fun with it as well. But today we're just going to be going over some very simple stuff, intro to powerlifting, do's and don'ts, as you may have seen from the title. And this is just going to be pretty straightforward, easy conceptual stuff, hopefully made for someone who is either interested in getting into powerlifting or has just started getting into powerlifting and is just looking for a little bit more structure and guidance on either where to start or how to progress if you did just start. So without any further ado, let's get into it. So first one, do practice squat, bench, and deadlift, and practice them to competition standard. So squat, bench, and deadlifts are the three lifts that are in powerlifting, and each of them have their own set of rules that come with them. So there's competition standard, so to say lift, and so with that, there's rules like squat. You have to reach depth, which is defined as the hip crease being below the knee or the hip joint, depending on your rule book and your given federation. But essentially, the hip needs to be below the top of the knee, as well as having other rules such as following the commands for starting and racking. Bench press has its own set of rules for doing pause reps and what that can and can't look like, as well as deadlift and what the execution of that lift needs to look like. If you are curious about what those rules are, I recommend that whatever federation you're either interested in looking into, you take a look at their rule book and get a better feel for what's going to be going on. Some things vary federation to federation, such as foot placement on bench press, whether you can have your heels up or not. There are rules whether you can get a handoff from someone of your choice or whether it has to be a spotter or loader. Different rules on the bars that are used in competition or the equipment used in competition. While you're going to be using calibrated plates across the board, there's variations in bars, different kinds of racks. There can either be a standard standing competition rack or some will have monoliths. There can be deadlift bars of different variety, or maybe you'll be deadlifting on a straight bar. So I would familiarize yourselves with the squat, bench, and deadlift. Make sure you are able to do them to competition standard and are aware of the equipment that you'll be using in competition on those three lifts. Now, that may sound like a lot, but this is just, it sounds like a lot on the surface, and then as you get into it, you'll come to figure out that this is just how it is, and it's the initial rule to learning anything in any sport. It's just, what are the rules, what's the equipment that you're using, what is the expectation of the sport, and what you need to do in it. My second do is going to be to sign up for a meet and give yourself at least 8 weeks. I typically prefer, if I'm working with an athlete, to have them be at least 12 weeks out from a meet. So we can use those first 4 to kind of figure out what works, what doesn't work for them, as well as giving a little bit of padding in case there's any life events and we need to build up some momentum. 8 weeks sounds like a lot of time, but 2 months in the gym, you can certainly make progress, but say you have a week where you aren't able to get into the gym or something like that, it can be hard to build back that momentum after that, as well as making sure that you have a competent and clear understanding of how to do all the lifts to that competition standard. I prefer to have a little bit more than 8 weeks, but 8 weeks I would say for most people should be the minimum of what you aim to do for your first meet. After you do that first one and you get a feel for it, you could decide if you would like to be a person who preps, say 20 weeks out from a meet, or if you are someone who just kind of wants to show up and maybe train for 2 weeks for it. But at least for the first one, I would give yourselves that time to really figure it out. And my third do is to get a coach, or at the very least a training partner or mentor who knows something about the sport. Ideally, you would get a coach who is very familiar with the rules of the sport. They have worked with clients and they have an understanding of how to peak and progress a lifter for competition day. But it's say that that's not in the budget for you, or that you don't really feel like putting in the effort to finding a coach to take you through those steps. Or maybe you just are not a very coachable individual and you're aware of that for yourself, and so you're just going to do it on your own. I would at least find someone to trains either at your gym or someone who has competed in the past. Pick their brain a little bit about what they would recommend, or train with them so they can take a look at your lifts as well. And I would say that should be the bare minimum of what you should seek to do. Obviously, there's a plethora of online information these days, so maybe if you find a content creator who makes very informative, well thought out content on how to prepare for a meet and giving a deeper understanding of the rules and regulations of what to expect, that could be a valid source as well. But I think the tiers that you're looking at is kind of like the top tier is getting a coach or someone in a similar position, a mentor role, to kind of take you through these things and how they understand it. Ideally, this person is either actively competing or has quite a few years of competition under their belt. And in that same vein, you would want to find someone who is at least somewhat aware of what's going on in the current powerlifting sphere, as it is an active sport where rules do get changed from time to time, and the methodologies of how to improve someone's given total, or maybe, other specific things that you would only know if you're actively engaged in it. It's probably not the wisest thing to do to go and hire someone to help you out who has not been paying attention to what's going on in the sport in 10 to 15 years. No discredit to older coaches who have fallen out of the game. But I know that for any sport, if you went and grabbed someone who was not paying attention to the sport at all in the last 10, 15 years, they're probably not going to be up to par with someone who's either actively involved in the sport or is at least following the sport. Now that ends my do's for today. My don'ts are going to be pretty simple, but they are important to take into consideration. So my first don't is don't overcomplicate it. Whether that be your program or just lifting in general, whatever it is, say that you end up not getting a coach, but you just talk to someone who's done powerlifting and they give you a little bit of advice about how to train for it. The big thing is don't go crazy with it. Say you're writing your own program. Simple periodization and progression apply when it comes to strength. Obviously, as people are involved with the sport for a long time, you end up having to change things to get progression to still occur and get the body to adapt in different ways. But if you are fresh on the scene and you are just now getting into this strength training style with squat, bench, and deadlift, it's very likely that if you just follow week-to-week progressive overload, gradually changing your rep schemes to get a bit more specific as you get closer to the competition week, that is likely going to lead you to success early on for your first meet. Changing everything week to week, going from, say, week 7, doing maybe a few sets of triples and then some volume on given accessories and stuff like that, and then into week 6 you're only doing singles and no accessories, and then into week 5 and it's all accessories, and then hitting a bunch of volume on your compound lifts. It's not to say that you could not see successful results in that time, but it is far less predictable and likely will not lead to an optimal game day performance. From there, my second dope is going to be don't compare yourself to others. Now, this is something that I see very, very commonly, especially in younger lifters as they get into the sport, is they're either timid to start because they have already compared themselves to other in something that they have never participated in their life, or they are comparing themselves to other people who are also just starting out and they aren't at the same caliber. For the former, I would say that comparing yourself to people who are either very high level or professional in the sport, no matter what you're doing at an entry level, is unwise. Whether it be your first day playing football and you're comparing yourself to guys in the NFL, or if it's your first day, doing gymnastics and you're comparing yourself to Simone Biles, there isn't really a good reason to start making comparisons as a novice in any given sport. It's good to have goals. It's good to have aspirations. It's good to have role models. It's good to see successful athletes in the sport. However, it is unfair to yourself, and it will probably only put you in a negative headspace if you are constantly comparing yourself to people who perform at a higher level than you, especially if they have been competing in a given sport and practicing it for far longer than you. The second hand of that is competing against people who are also novice like you, but they are stronger than you or more technically proficient than you. We all come from different backgrounds. We cannot control our genetics, and even though effort may be high in training, there is almost always certainly going to be someone bigger, stronger, faster, better looking, better smelling, better whatever than you. You are likely not the 1% of the 1% of the 1% who is the optimal human specimen, and if you are, fantastic for you. But most people are not going to be. And you need to be honest with yourself about that it is not the end of the world if you show up for your first competition and there's another guy there who is also his first day of competition and he benches 5 more pounds than you, squats 5 more pounds than you, and deadlifts 5 more pounds than you. It's not a fair thing to do to yourself to start discrediting yourself just because whatever random variables of each other's life had led up to that moment, you are discrediting what you have done or demonizing the qualities and characteristics of this other person who just showed up and is also lifting for the first time ever. Just comparison is the thief of joy, as the saying goes, and it couldn't be more true, especially when it comes to strength sport, where things are so linear in what you're graded on. Simply who lifts more weight at a given body weight is the winner. And so on your first meet, just go, just lift, just have fun. If you are talented in the sport and you think you can win, fantastic, but I would not set your expectations of your very first meet to do anything absolutely crazy unless maybe you are a genetic phenomenon, an outlier who you are well aware of this and are going to perform at a high level regardless of it's your first time or not. Now, my last don't of the day is a bit more simple, just brings you back to the gym. Don't skip your accessories. A lot of people, they first get into powerlifting and, they see their big celebrity lifters that they follow online and, say you've got a woman squatting 500 pounds, you see a guy benching 600 pounds, deadlifting, people are deadlifting 600, 700, 800 pounds for reps now. And you need to realize that, one, those people are not the norm. 2, these people have probably been doing this for a long time. Sometimes, people are novices and genetic freaks and they just have a lot of talent in the sport naturally that they come into it. But the majority of these people, the vast majority of these people have been working out, 1, for a long time. 2, they've been training very, very hard. And 3, all that they do is not squat, bench, and deadlift. It may be the core foundation of what they are doing year-round is a form of squatting, a form of benching, and a form of deadlifting. And even if it is barbell squat, bench, and deadlift year-round, that is almost certainly not all they are doing in their training. The vast majority of successful powerlifters have a lot of muscle on their frame. Obviously, the smaller the lifter is, there's those 59 kilo lifters and 60 kilo, 66 kilo, 67.5. You've got all those really small lifters who are phenomenally strong, and you might think, well, they're not huge, they're not ginormous, they don't have a lot of muscle mass on their frame. And I would argue, how could they if they're 59, 60 kilo? You can still be jacked but not be huge. And the majority of those successful powerlifters are. And how they got that way was not exclusively through squatting, benching, and deadlifting. They would push their accessories, and they are going to push those movements, and they have been doing that for years and years and years. And so my number one thing to say to do would, don't try too early to just make the core foundation of what you do squatting, benching, and deadlifting. They are very, very valuable for building muscle and building strength. Squat, bench, and deadlift are all phenomenal exercises. However, they are not what makes you an amazing powerlifter, is just doing those year in, year out, all around, and not doing much else. You need those accessories to build up your frame, put more muscle mass on your frame, aid you in whatever shortcomings you may have on your squat, bench, and deadlift. Maybe you have sticking points, or maybe you are muscularly underdeveloped in one area and it's leading you to fail on lifts. Pushing your accessories and training hard in other ways outside of squat, bench, and deadlift, especially when you are far out from a competition, say that you're planning on competing in the summer and it's Christmas time, you've got a lot of time to prepare. And that's the time where you need to be pushing things other than just squat, bench, and deadlift. As you get closer to competition time, that's when you can start pulling off on the gas for the accessories and start putting the gas on for squat, bench, and deadlift quite a bit more specifically. But as you start out, make sure that you do squat, you do bench, you do deadlift, you do push those lifts from time to time, but a majority of the time, week in, week out, you're pushing those accessories, putting more muscle mass on your frame, and building up your foundation. So those are my big 3 do's and don'ts as you are getting into powerlifting. Certainly there are other do's and don'ts. Feel free to drop a comment below if you have any wisdom that you would like to share, and as well as leave a like on this video if you found it informative in any capacity. Hopefully I can put out more content soon. This was just a bit more broad and general of a topic, nothing too crazy here, but hopefully you guys found this video informative, and I will see you guys in the next one.